Do you have an area of expertise thanks to your education or your professional experience that would make for really fascinating writing? Well, our guest tonight on Writer Talks is doing exactly that. Her name is McKenzie Tastan, and she went to school for archaeology. So pair that with a great imagination and lots of travel that she's experienced. And what do you get? Fascinating stories. Welcome, Mackenzie, to Writer Talks.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. I'm so excited that you're here. I'm Elizabeth Ann Atkins, as you know, part of Two Sisters Writing and Publishing, and you are one of the winners of our monthly short story contest who will be featured in the next edition of our annual international anthology. And your story is called Homo Tuatha, which is all about archaeology. So, can you talk about your winning story, please?
Sure. So I got the idea for my story. I went to school to do archaeology and I did it for a couple of years as a career. And I was watching a lot of documentaries about it, because I just still think it's fascinating, even though I'm not in school anymore. And I started thinking about what would happen if a group of archaeologists found some fossils that they couldn't explain. What if
Uh-huh.
they found some fossils that were from something like a mythical creature or something, and that was how I got the idea for it. But I tried to write it as if it were nonfiction. Like, I didn't want it to write it like a story. I wanted to write it as if it were a documentary, as if it were a news article. So the style of it is meant to read like nonfiction, but then you keep reading and you're like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't these aren't real. So it's meant to surprise you at the end when you realize that the fossils are from a mythical creature. I guess I just spoiled it for everyone, but
I love it. That's so fun. It's really awesome, but it really takes a lot of imagination based in the factual knowledge that you have with your archaeology training, which is a great tip for writers to, they say write what you know. So you didn't have to go research that kind of stuff. It was just already in your head, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I think write what you know is a great way to start, especially when you think it doesn't have to be all about what you know. Start out with what you know, start out with what you understand the details of, and then you can take it in any direction that you want to go. You can go anywhere
Uh-huh.
crazy.
Yes, yes, yes. I love that so much. So let's talk also, Mackenzie, about how you've traveled a lot and lived in different states and how that also enhances your knowledge base for writing.
It definitely has. So I worked for the National Park Service for a while, and I actually lived at a national park in Arizona.
Which
So the park,
one?
Walnut Canyon.
Where is that?
So it's just outside of Flagstaff. I guess I was lucky that it wasn't too far in the middle of nowhere, but it was still like no internet, no phone service. We lived at the park, so we were kind of out there. We were isolated. The park had ancient ruins. It had cliff dwellings there that people would come to see. So it was a really cool, like, romantic experience, I guess, until you did it for a year and then you got tired of the no internet and having to drive
Oh
really
my
far to get
gosh.
anywhere.
Oh
So
my goodness. So when you experience, you're from Ohio, and that's where you are now. And when you experience a terrain and a culture like Arizona, which Flagstaff is high elevation, there's so many other dynamics you deal with. You had to adjust to that altitude. You had to adjust to, you're coming from a state where there's more people. Now you're in like a rustic area, rugged land, deeply spiritual, beautiful. So, what was that like? Did that also enhance your writing repertoire?
I think definitely. I think anytime that you get a chance to talk to people who have like had really different life experiences than what you've had, any of those people can sort of serve as inspiration for a story. And you might not realize it at the time, but later on you might write a character and realize, oh, this is actually just like, Steve, the guy that I worked with at the park. And it turns out that, he shows up in several stories.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Catherine and I always used to say when we had different jobs, we would call it paid research because every person and situation you encounter is like research for writing. You just file it away, and someday it's going to pop up and you're going to create something great from it.
I think that's so true.
hmm hmm So, have you written any stories about your Arizona experience?
Oh gosh, I guess not specifically. Maybe I should. I guess I feel a little bit hesitant to write because Arizona has so many like Native American sites and it's that kind of archaeology. And I didn't do that when I was there. I just I did visitor services at the park, so it was like customer service and leading tours and stuff. So
Hmm.
I'm kind of afraid, I think, that I would get the details wrong and that
Oh,
my former coworkers or like friends would find me on Facebook and be like, "That's wrong. You did it wrong."
oh,
So
wow. I love your sensitivity. That's wonderful. That is awesome. That's super. That's so important, McKenzie, because there have been writers who got cultural things wrong and they've been lambasted as a result. So I
oh,
appreciate your sensitivity. That's really cool. But you could still draw from other experiences, like just your personal. It kind of reminds me of that woman who wrote the book that was in the Oprah Book Club, where she went out in the wilderness by herself and wrote a book. I don't remember the name, pardon me. Remember that book?
oh
L-
yeah.
Uh-huh.
I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, but I
Mhm.
don't remember the name of
I
it.
know, shame. I'll figure it out. But that was a powerful thing, like a woman in a new environment writing about all these wild experiences. I mean, there's different bugs, there's different birds, you know? Okay, so where else have you gone?
Oh gosh, I also used to live in Washington State. I used to live in Florida. I think a lot of like a motif that pops up in my writing a lot is Florida has really big snakes. If you're an
Uh-huh.
archaeologist, that
Uh-huh.
definitely crops up. I think I'll be writing conversations between characters, and that will just end up in there. Like, oh, have you done any work in Florida? Like, no, that's where the big snakes live.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Wow, that's fascinating. So snakes are so symbolic. Do you write about the symbolism and, they're slithery and they're sneaky and they're scary, but they're beautiful and all that?
Oh gosh, no, that's really deep and poetic and like no, mine's just like, oh, you're just out there doing your job and it's right there and it's really big. And maybe you want to go
Okay.
find a coworker and get them to get rid of it because you don't want to be near it.
Wow. Okay. So when you were in these different venues, did you do writing there or did you come back and then say, wow, I've got all this material now I can write?
Gosh, when I was doing it, I wasn't really actively writing about it. I don't think it was until a couple years later when I started writing more regularly, doing it as more of like a regular hobby instead of just something I would do every now and then that I was like, gosh, if I'm going to write a story, what should I write about? And I think I always come back to those experiences then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. So what's your writing like rhythm like? Do you write in the morning, evening, middle of the night, weekend?
I'm a night owl. I've always been a night owl. So I think for me, definitely it's probably middle of the night, like evening to middle of the night is definitely when it happens. And then I have to get up in the morning and I'm super tired. Um,
Oh, wow. Okay. So how does that work? Like, do you just get an energy surge and you say, I'm going to write for 3 hours or what do you do?
I probably don't write as regularly as I should. I know that's one of the big things, like advice we always give to writers is like, you should write every day. And I should, but I think for me, it's more like I will get an idea and the idea will stay with me for days and it won't go away until I write about it. And so it's kind of like, I just sit on it until I'm like, okay, fine, I'll do it. I'll
Uh-huh.
write you.
Okay. Okay.
So it's more like that.
So they're really talking to you, like, you better write this down.
And we're not going to let you focus on anything else until you
I
do.
love it. Now,
So
do you use a notebook, a computer, a pen and pencil? What do you do?
I use a computer. Yeah, I have awful handwriting. So that would just be a huge amount of frustration, I think, if I were to write it out by hand. And then even, I mean, someone else could never read it, but even me going back to read it would be a struggle, I think. So
Uh-huh. And so when you sit down to write, does it just flow or do you have to like make an outline and
I
really?
have tried to do outlines more. I guess what do they call it? They call it plotters and pantsters, right?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
so, I mean, I'm definitely a pantster. I think when it comes to, especially with shorter stuff, I usually just go with that. I'm trying more now to work on longer pieces, like work on longer stories, or like I just finished up a full length play. And when it comes to those longer pieces, I make myself do an outline. I don't know if that's something that really comes naturally, or maybe I'll do that first scene that I have in my mind, just, oh, I'll write this and get it out, but then I'll make myself sit down and really be like, okay, where is this going to go? Because inevitably it's like if I try to just write something longer without a plan, I just end up rewriting more because I realized, oh wait, that's not really going to go anywhere. I just wrote this middle of nowhere scene that doesn't fit. So, and that happened in my last play. I was part of like a playwriting group with some other playwrights, and we all would get together over Zoom and like read each other's work every week, which was
Mhm.
great. It was really helpful. But I had this scene where it was just two people in an unemployment office talking, and we got to the end of the play, and they were like, "So what was going on? Like,
Oh my
what was
gosh.
with that scene?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I just wrote it and thought it was funny." And they were like, "Yeah, it's not funny. You need to get rid of it." So
Oh my goodness. Wow. How do you take criticism like that?
I mean, they said it nicer than that.
Oh.
They were like, "Oh, I don't really think it advances the story," and this, they were much
Oh.
nicer about it. But I think it's
Oh.
important, especially if you have friends that you trust to read your writing, like
Mhm.
people whose advice you really value. You don't always have to take it, but I think it's important to consider it. If someone that you trust to read your work says, "Oh, I really wasn't sure what was happening here," or "It wasn't clear who was speaking," like you should go back over that and really think about, oh, how did I tell the reader who was talking, or like, oh, was it not clear who was doing what in this scene? Because like we do have to rewrite, right? Just because it's clear to us, because like we already know the story, doesn't mean that it's clear to like a reader.
Mhm. Mhm. Are you in a writing group?
I mean, I guess I was part of the Ohio Playwrights Circle. I guess that's the closest that I've come to
Mhm.
one. It was really great.
Mhm. Mhm. And what did you like being about? I mean, some writers love being in a group, some writers can't work without it, some are totally solo. So what was the benefit for you?
For me, I think it was because I wanted to write a play. I just thought it would be something different. I've never tried that before. It was a totally new thing for me. And I guess because plays are meant to be performed, it was really helpful to hear it read out loud and hear how the dialogue sounded, to be like, oh, this is something that would sound good, with an actor saying it on stage versus like, oh no, that didn't sound how I thought it would.
Uh-huh. Interesting, fascinating. And so, what about your writing, like any habits or rituals? Do you have to have a certain pen by your side with a notebook while you're on your computer, or do you have to have coffee or kombucha or tea or something or snacks? Do you write in a certain place?
So I have a pet rabbit. My pet rabbit's name is Charlie, and I always say
Oh,
that Charlie is my writing mascot.
oh,
So
I love
I'll
it.
sit down in our basement, which is where he hangs out, because he is like a free range rabbit in the
Free
basement.
range rabbit in the house.
Yeah. So I
Woo!
I will sit down there with him, and start typing, and he'll just come over and like sit right next to me, and he'll sit with me for probably hours, like a long time. He's good company. So I have a writing bunny, I guess.
Does he just sit there and look at you, or does he purr, or what do rabbits do?
Yeah, he does. They do tooth purring, which is where they click their teeth really fast, and that's their version of purring. And actually, when you
Oh,
type the keys, the noise sounds to him like tooth purring. And so he thinks that
oh,
I'm relaxed and happy and that I'm purring. And so he
oh,
wants to come and sit down next to me and also purr, and he
oh,
just wants to enjoy it and sit there with me. So
oh, that is so sweet. Oh my goodness. And so, wow. And he sits on your desk?
No, I usually sit on the floor, or there's a love seat that he'll hop up next to me and sit on the love seat with me.
How big is he?
He's about 5 pounds, so he's not big.
Is that like this or like this?
Yeah, that's about like this.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so and then are rabbits like potty trained or litter
He,
box users
yeah,
or what?
they'll use a litter box just like a
Oh,
cat,
okay.
um, mostly.
Okay. Mostly.
Surprise!
Okay.
Right, every once in a while, but no, they're pretty good about it usually.
Okay. Okay. So you said that rabbits make their way into your writing too.
Yes,
Like
yes.
how?
So one of my first stories that I wrote, the first story that I ever, I guess, wrote and submitted to a contest and was published, was a ghost story. But the second one that I wrote was a heartwarming Christmas story for a local newspaper, and they had a contest. And my heartwarming Christmas story was about a single mom who wanted to get her kids a pet for Christmas, but they lived in an apartment, and the apartment didn't allow like
Oh.
pets, like cats and dogs. And she was like, "Oh, I feel so bad. What can I get my kids who really want a pet?" And she finds a rabbit at her apartment complex. And, there are certain breeds of rabbits that are like domestic, they're meant to be pets. And so she finds the rabbit and she takes it in. And then she finds out that because it's caged, her apartment will allow her to keep it. And so she's able to get her kids a rabbit for Christmas.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. And so certain that's awesome. Now, where is that story?
If you Google, it's the newspaper is called the Pleasanton Express. So I think it's probably still on their archives of their website somewhere,
Mhm.
but I think it's just called The Christmas Pet.
Oh, okay. Okay. By the way, if you want to watch, you're watching this today and you want to read Mackenzie's short story that won our contest, please go to twosisterswriting.com/winning stories and you can see hers and read it. And it also lists some of the other things she's written. So, Mackenzie, do you want to talk about some of the other pieces that you've gotten published?
Sure. So most of my stuff, we were talking earlier about how I love romance, but I can never write romance, and
Uh-huh.
I always set out. I'm like, it's going to be a romance, and it never is. Most of
That's
my
so
stuff,
funny.
most of my stuff is horror and dark fantasy. Some of my stuff is really dark. Actually, the most recent thing that I had published in print was in the Momaya Press anthology for this year. And it was called, what's this one? I actually don't remember what it's called. I think it's called The Woods Witch. And it's
Ooh.
about like a Baba Yaga figure who finds a little girl lost in the woods. And she feels sorry for her because she's obviously been neglected, and she decides to take her in. And so it's a dark theme, but I guess with a happy ending.
When you say witch, like what's the definition of witch in the story?
In my stories, witch is like a literal, like a magical person, not like a person who someone else thinks is a witch, or like a practitioner of Wicca, not anything like that. It's like an actual like fairy tale creature
Oh,
with magical powers.
like Glenda the Good Witch?
More like Baba Yaga from, I don't know if you know those stories, like for those Russian stories, or I'm trying to think of it for like a more popular fairy tale, like the witch from Hansel and Gretel.
Oh, okay, okay. Wait, wasn't she trying to put them in the oven?
But what if she didn't? What if she was nice and they just stayed with her?
Okay. Okay, well, as a writer, you have the ability to ask those questions, what if, and retool stories and, redirect. I love that. And make definitions of your own. That is super powerful. So, have you considered writing a novel?
Gosh, I've tried, and I've certainly written, pieces of novels. And I've outlined things and like, okay, it's going to be this, it's going to be, this long, and like chapter by chapter, and I've just never gotten it finished. So
Hmm.
maybe one day. I think that's definitely my goal as a writer, right? That's
Hmm.
definitely up there. It's like one of these days
Yes.
I'm gonna
Okay.
write a whole
Okay.
novel. So
Yeah.
yeah, one day.
Okay. Excellent. Now, how has the pandemic changed your writing rhythm or productivity or creativity?
I think for me, definitely, my writing productivity has been way up during the pandemic. I was laid off from my job. I was a manager at an ice cream shop.
Oh,
Um,
wow. See,
yeah.
more paid research. I love it.
Oh yes.
Ooh,
So
wow. I
that's
bet
what I
you've
was.
got some stories.
Oh my goodness, yes, I do. Yeah, that's what I was doing. I was managing an ice cream shop in San Francisco, and the pandemic hit, and my husband and I were just stuck at home in our one room apartment in San Francisco.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
so we decided to come back to Ohio to stay with my mom. So we've been here hanging out with her, and it's
That's
been good so
awesome.
far. Like we all get
Good.
along, but I've definitely had way more time to write. Actually went back to school. I just finished up a professional writing certificate from like my local community college. So
Congratulations. How
thank
cool is
you.
that? That's awesome.
So it's
Awesome.
it's been really positive for me. I mean, I guess that sounds bad, sounding like the pandemic has been positive for anyone, but it was a good
Well,
opportunity for me to go back to school and hopefully do a career change. So
good for you. That is awesome. And there's no shame in saying that you had some benefits from retreating from the world and staying safe, you know. I'm sure you say it in a spirit of um, sensitivity for all those who are grieving. It's totally fine because I've been all about that for writers to use the time, and if you can, to write. This is the time. Close the door, turn off the phone, and write. You're not going out to parties and other things. Look, if you had a full-time job and you were commuting, now you have the commute time. That alone could be the writing time you need to just at least feel like you're loving your craft and doing it, you know? So that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so Mackenzie, I want to go back to San Francisco, one-room apartment, husband, ice cream shop. That sounds fascinating for stories and people. I bet you saw people in love, people breaking up, people who were sad, people who were like, who knows, happy, uh, all kinds of flavors of ice cream. I mean, can you take us there and like what kind of ideas you got from it?
Oh gosh, I don't know that I got as many ideas like from the customers as I did from my coworkers who
Oh.
all were like college students and just had crazy personal lives, just always just the craziness. So just the things that people would tell me that they
Uh-huh.
had done or they had seen, and I would be like, wow, that happened.
Oh,
Okay.
really? Have you
So
ever seen that t-shirt that says, "Be careful of what you tell me because I might put it in my novel"?
I've never seen that, but I love that.
There's people who won't tell me stuff or talk about stuff in front of me because they're afraid I would put it in a book, which I would never violate anybody like that. And you can change names and locations and stuff enough to make it unrecognizable.
I
So,
do that a lot. I don't know about you, but I think all of my best ideas for my work, if I'm really honest, start out as fan fiction. I think everything
oh,
that I
wow.
do probably comes from, somewhere something else, like like the witch from Hansel and Gretel, right? Like, but what if she was nice, and what if they
Ah,
just stayed with her? And
uh-huh.
I had a whole story. Actually, yeah, I wrote a whole story about that. It hasn't appeared anywhere yet, but since
Wow.
it seemed like their dad and stepmom didn't really care about them, what if the witch was just like, oh, come stay with me? What kind of adventures might they have had?
Wow, that's fascinating. Oh my goodness. So, Mackenzie, when you went to school and got your writing certificate at the local college, what did you learn maybe as a writer that you weren't even aware that you didn't know?
Oh gosh, there were a lot of things because we don't know what we don't know, right?
Right, right.
And I think the most important thing that I learned, I guess, as far as nonfiction writing, I had to take one journalism class, just one, and
Hmm.
that one really opened up doors for me. I think, and opened up my eyes to nonfiction writing and to like
Hmm.
different types of publications that accept work from writers that I never thought about. And so I started writing for the school's newspaper because my
Oh,
teacher was like, "We accept anyone, we take anyone, like
uh-huh.
anyone that wants to do it." And then because of that, I had published clips of nonfiction work. And then now I have a freelance gig with a local paper because I had like published work that I was able to show them, like, oh, look, I did this for my school paper. And it was like, I don't know, just that one class was enough to hopefully really change my life, in a way that I never had
Wow.
considered before.
Wow, that's so cool. My background is journalism, and the people I know, yeah, I have a master's from Columbia and I worked at the Detroit News and other newspapers, but it lays such a powerful foundation because when you have to ask the five W's and H, who, what, when, where, how, and why, with everything you write, it really helps you embellish the details in a story to put the reader there and make them feel really engaged. Did you agree with that?
Oh, yeah.
Mhm, mhm. It also makes you ask so many questions that, really help the reader stay informed and just really hooks them in. So good for you. I'm so happy for you.
Thanks.
So, what's the most challenging thing about writing?
Oh gosh. I mean, I guess I can't speak for other people, but I think for me, there definitely are times, when I have deadlines to finish a project, either because I want to submit it somewhere and they're closing, the window for submissions is closing, or like I've told someone, okay, I'll have it to you by this date. And sometimes the ideas just don't come.
Mhm.
So I think that's definitely hard for me as a writer. And then it's like you can, there are ways to push your way through it or to overcome that writer's block. But I think when I do that, I always worry that maybe I'm not producing my best work. Okay, I said
Mm.
I would write a thing for you and I did, and here it is, but I
Uh-huh.
didn't know what to write about and maybe it's not good.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Questioning and boosting your confidence as a writer. That's a thing. Is this good enough? Is it trash? That stereotype of the writer on the typewriter and then balling up the paper and throwing it on the garbage can is exploding with balls of paper.
Sure, sure.
Now we can just delete, but so what does it feel to you when you get in your flow, when you're like writing and it's just pouring out like it's just you're getting a download of it?
I think for me, it feels like I'm honestly in a different place. Like, obviously, there's a physical sense that I'm at my computer typing, but there's also sort of a sense that like I'm actually somewhere else observing events, or not necessarily participating in the events, because it'd be kind of hard if you're like writing a scene where you're like running away from a killer or something. It's hard to be like, oh, I'm that person running, but it's like as
Uh-huh.
if you're sort of there with a notepad or a video camera, like, okay, what's going on?
Right,
Let me
right.
get this down. So I like that sense of being somewhere else.
Yes, that's really fun. It's like another dimension, right?
Yeah.
And then your husband, is he a writer too?
No, he's a software developer.
Like the opposite.
Yeah.
Well, does he inspire you?
Oh gosh. He whenever I tell him that I'm gonna write romance, he's always like, "Oh, are you gonna write it about me?" Um, he always says that.
That's awesome. How fun
And
is that?
to some extent, I'm sure that that's true. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of the like, because I have romantic characters in some of my stories, even though they're not in the romance genre, and I'm sure a lot of them are, like tall, dark, handsome men with foreign accents. I'm sure that comes out
Uh-huh.
often.
Uh-huh. And that's your husband?
That's my husband. Yeah, I'm just a lucky person.
Wow. Oh, I love that. That's so fun. Oh my gosh. That's awesome. Awesome. So, Mackenzie, what tips would you offer to writers out there who are watching right now based on your experience?
Gosh, I think I would just say don't be afraid to get started. Like whatever you feel like writing, whether it's a short poem or a really short story, even if it's I started out writing flash fiction because the idea of writing something longer was just really overwhelming and I just didn't think that I could do it. And so I started out writing only stories that were under 1,000 words. And for me, it was like that word limit really helped me, okay, if I can it was like it doesn't have to be good or you don't have to feel like it's the best thing ever, just if you can actually sit down and write it, whether it's a short story or flash fiction, however long it is, just do it. And if it's good enough, or even if later on you decide it's not good enough, that first one is the hardest. So just
Yeah.
don't be afraid to do it, and don't be afraid to show it to people and be like, I wrote this, what do you think about it?
Oh, very cool. Very cool. For those who aren't familiar, is flash fiction just about the length or is it about speed as well?
It's just about the length. Usually, flash fiction is anything that's under 1,000 words. I think sometimes it can be a little bit longer, but it's like shorter than a short story, basically. And the
Hmm.
idea is that it's a complete, like, it's not supposed to be a part of a longer piece. It's supposed to be something that's complete, but very short.
Hmm. Okay. And that make that, you know what? I recently heard Joyce Carol Oates say writing something small gives you a sense of accomplishment. Because when you're writing a big book, it's like seems endless. So does that give you like a boost?
It definitely does for me. Yeah. If you can write something small and you can say, I'm finished with it, I'm done with you, instead of that with that longer piece where you're always working on it and working on it, that
Uh-huh.
idea that just is something completed. I think definitely for me, that's a good feeling. In some ways, maybe that's a better feeling than
Yeah.
having the long thing, even when you make good progress on it because it's not
Mm-hmm.
finished.
I love it. I love it. So what's your big writing dream?
Oh gosh, I guess my big writing dream is probably to publish a novel one day. I mean, we'll see. Maybe, maybe it
Mm-hmm.
could happen.
Mm-hmm.
I guess in the shorter term, I like to do like long-term goals and then short-term goals for myself too
Mm-hmm.
as a writer. So I think in the shorter term, I did write a play. So maybe this year, like my goal would be to see if I could find somewhere to perform the play. And when you get your work performed as a playwright, a lot of times you don't make money, especially if it's local. But it's like, you know, if you
Oh,
can get a theater to accept it and do it, just to be able to like go and see it live, I think would be really cool.
yes. Wow, that's awesome. Good for you. That is just wonderful. So, Mackenzie, is there anything else you'd like to share here on Writer Talks about your short stories or your future or your writing tips?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, I guess if anyone's interested in learning more about my work, they can look me up on Google. Or I did write a nonfiction children's book that's available on Amazon. It's called "I Am Grace O'Malley, the Pirate Queen." So if you're interested
Oh,
in learning a little bit of history in the like 8 to 12 for readers 8 to 12 range,
oh, I
you
love
can check that
that.
out.
I'm going to put a link in the description box. First, of course, to your winning short story on the twosisterswriting.com website. And secondly, I will put the link to that book as well. So anybody who wants to get it, they can. And I'll put links to our anthologies, and you'll be in the next one. So it's going to have a super jazzy cover with a mer creature on it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right, Mackenzie, thank you so much for joining me here on Writer Talks tonight. I wish you the absolute best.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you, all of you, for joining us here on Writer Talks, where you got to meet McKenzie Tastan and talk about all of her fascinating writing inspired by her archaeology studies and her rabbit and her husband and her travels and all of the great tips that she shared with us tonight. Please do go to twosisterswriting.com/winning stories and check out Mackenzie's story, Homo Tuatha, and our other winning stories. They're super fun and they're by writers from all around the world. Please also click that red subscribe button right here so you can subscribe to the channel and never miss another episode of Writer Talks every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Please also leave a comment if you have a question, give us a thumbs up for this awesome interview, and follow me on Twitter at Two Sisters Writing, which is at the number two, Sisters Writing, and at Elizabeth Atkins. And remember, happy reading and happy writing.